Patton steps aside, gesturing to the survivors sitting along the wall. These are the people from Grafino. The ones you didn't manage to kill. Look at them. Hoffman keeps his eyes forward, refusing to look. Patton's voice becomes steel. I said look at them. Hoffman's head turns slowly. He looks at the survivors. The old woman who lost her entire family. The teenage boy who watched his parents burn. The young mother who heard her daughter's screams. Their faces are hollow with grief and trauma. For the first time, Hoffman's military bearing completely breaks. He looks away quickly. You can't even face them, Patton says quietly. You could burn them alive when they were helpless. You could bar the church doors and listen to them scream. But you can't look them in the eye now. Because you're a coward. The silence in the room is crushing. One of the survivors, the old woman, begins to weep quietly. Hoffman's face is pale, sweat visible on his forehead. Patton continues, these people are going to watch your trial. They're going to testify. They're going to see justice done. And then they're going to rebuild their village and remember you as the coward who murdered their families. Hoffman finally finds his voice. In heavily accented English, he says, I am prisoner of war. Geneva Convention protects. Patton cuts him off immediately. The Geneva Convention protects soldiers who follow the laws of war. You're a war criminal. The convention doesn't apply to you. Hoffman tries again, I followed orders. My superiors commanded. Oh, here we go, Patton interrupts. The standard excuse. I was following orders. Every coward says that when caught. Let me tell you something about orders, soldiers can refuse illegal orders. You could have said no. You could have disobeyed. But you didn't. You enthusiastically carried out the murder of 217 people. That's not following orders. That's choosing to be a murderer. Patton walks back to his desk and sits down, leaning back in his chair. You want to hide behind following orders? Fine. We'll find your superiors too. We'll find everyone in your chain of command. And you'll all hang together. But your orders don't excuse what you did. They just mean there are more war criminals to prosecute. Hoffman is visibly shaking now. The reality of his situation is finally sinking in. Patton leans forward on his desk. Let me tell you what's going to happen to you. First, you're going to be held in a prisoner camp with other SS war criminals. Not with regular German POWs. They don't want you either. You'll be segregated with the other murderers and sadists. Second, you're going to be investigated. Every operation you participated in. Every village you burned. Every person you killed. All of it documented. Third, you're going to be tried. Not by military tribunal, you don't deserve that honor. By an international court. For crimes against humanity. Fourth, you're going to be convicted. Because we have your own records. Your own handwriting. Documenting your own crimes. You made our job easy. Fifth, you're going to be sentenced. And given what you did, given how many people you murdered, there's only one appropriate sentence. Patton pauses, letting that sink in. Hoffman is now openly trembling. And sixth, Patton continues quietly, you're going to hang. And when you do, I'm going to make sure survivors from Grafino are there to witness it. So the last faces you see before you drop will be the people whose families you murdered. Hoffman's defiance is completely gone. He's struggling to maintain composure, fighting tears. Patton isn't finished. You want to know why this matters so much? Why I brought you here personally? Why I'm spending time on you when I have a war to finish? I'll tell you. Every time I see German soldiers, real soldiers, men who fought with honor even though they served an evil regime, I can separate the soldier from the cause. I can respect their courage even while destroying their army. But you? You represent everything we're fighting against. Not German military skill. Not tactical excellence. Pure evil. The kind of evil that burns children alive and writes reports about it. That's what we came here to destroy. Men like you. You're the reason this war had to be fought. You're the reason Germany had to be completely defeated. Because as long as men like you held power, there could be no peace, no civilization, no humanity. So when I bring you to justice, I'm not just punishing you for Grafenau. I'm sending a message to every other SS officer, every other war criminal: your ideology lost. Your methods lost. And you will face the consequences. Patton stands up and walks to the window, looking out over the German countryside. Then he turns back to Hoffman. I'm going to ask you one question. You can answer honestly, or you can lie. But I'll know which you're doing. He pauses. Why? Why did you burn that village? Germany was beaten. The war was lost. You knew it. Everyone knew it. So why? What possible reason could you have? Hoffman is silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, in broken English, they were inferior. Jews, Slavs, Germans who helped enemies. It was my duty to stop. Patton interrupts. Just stop. You murdered 217 people, including children, because you thought they were inferior. Because of Nazi racial ideology that the whole world has rejected. Hoffman says nothing. Patton shakes his head in disgust. That's your answer? Ideology? Not even military necessity. Just hatred. Just evil. He walks back to his desk. That answer just guaranteed you hang. Because it proves you knew exactly what you were doing. You chose murder. Deliberately. With full understanding. No soldier following orders. Just a murderer who enjoyed his work. Hoffman, now desperate, tries once more. I regret. No, Patton cuts him off. Don't you dare. Don't you dare stand there and claim regret now that you're caught. You documented your crimes with pride. You kept records like trophies. You had years to feel regret. You didn't. The only thing you regret is getting caught. Hoffman starts to speak again. Patton's voice rises. You want forgiveness? You want redemption? Then you should have sought it before you burned 217 people alive. You should have sought it when you barred those church doors and listened to people scream. But you didn't. You moved on to the next village, looking for more people to murder. So no. You don't get redemption. You don't get forgiveness. You get justice. That's all you deserve. The room is absolutely silent. Even Patton's staff, accustomed to his legendary temper, have never seen him like this, not raging, but coldly, methodically destroying another man's last shreds of dignity and hope. Hoffman is openly crying now, all SS discipline gone. Patton watches with no sympathy whatsoever. Get him out of my sight, Patton finally says to the MPs, take him to the war crimes holding facility. I don't want to see his face again until the trial. The MPs escort Hoffman out. He's completely broken, stumbling, crying. As the door closes, silence fills the room. Patton turns to the survivors from Grafenau. He speaks through the translator. I promised you justice. You'll have it. This man will be tried, convicted, and executed for what he did to your village. It won't bring your families back. Nothing can. But he will face the consequences of his actions. The old woman stands slowly. She walks up to Patton, says something in German. The translator relays. She says thank you. She says you gave them justice when they thought there would be none. She says God will bless you for defending the innocent. Patton's stern expression softens slightly. He takes the old woman's hand gently. Ma'am, I'm just doing what any soldier should do. Protecting civilians. Punishing those who harm them. It's the bare minimum of decency. He addresses all the survivors: "You'll be provided transport back to what's left of Grafeno, and my engineers will help you begin rebuilding. It's not enough. But it's what I can do." After the survivors leave, Patton sits heavily in his chair. His aide later reports he looked exhausted. After the confrontation, Patton meets with his senior staff. They're shaken by what they witnessed. His intelligence officer asks, "Sir, why did you do it that way? You could have just sent him to war crimes investigators without the personal confrontation." Patton is quiet for a moment. Then, "Because someone needed to look that bastard in the eye and tell him exactly what he is. Not just process him through the system. Tell him. To his face. That his ideology lost. That his methods were evil. That he's a war criminal, not a soldier." His chief of staff asks, "Did it accomplish anything? He'll be tried regardless." Patton nods. "Maybe nothing practical. But those survivors needed to see an American general tell their murderer that he'd face justice. They needed to know we take this seriously. That we don't just see them as collateral damage in a bigger war. They matter. Their families mattered. And the man who killed them will hang for it." Another officer speaks up, "Sir, there are dozens, maybe hundreds of SS officers who committed similar crimes. We can't personally confront them all." Patton stands. "I know. But word will spread. Every SS war criminal we catch will hear about this. They'll know that we're not just processing them. We're judging them. And they'll hang." 3 months later, August 1945, Nuremberg. SS Sturmbannführer Klaus Hoffmann is tried before an Allied military tribunal for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The charges are extensive: Grafeno massacre, 217 counts of murder. Documented participation in mass executions in Poland, 1939. Documented participation in anti-partisan operations in Russia, 1941–43, resulting in thousands of civilian deaths. Documented participation in reprisal killings in France, 1944. The evidence is overwhelming. Hoffmann's own records provide most of it. He documented his own crimes meticulously. The prosecution reads his log entries aloud. Clinical descriptions of mass murder, written with bureaucratic precision. Survivors from Grafeno testify. Their testimony is devastating. They describe the screams from the church. The sight of their village burning. The bodies of their families. Hoffmann's defense attorney argues he was following orders. The tribunal rejects this immediately. Illegal orders can and should be refused. Hoffmann chose to obey. The trial lasts 3 days. The verdict takes 10 minutes to reach: guilty on all counts. The sentence: death by hanging. October 1945. Landsberg Prison, Germany. Hoffmann is executed by hanging at 2 a.m. True to Patton's promise, survivors from Grafeno are permitted to witness the execution. They stand in the witness gallery, watching as Hoffmann is brought into the execution chamber. He's terrified, crying, begging for mercy. There is none. His last words are incoherent pleas. The hood is placed over his head. The noose secured. The trap door opens. He drops. Within minutes, he's declared dead. The survivors watch in silence. No celebration. No cheers. Just quiet, solemn witnessing of justice served. Afterwards, the old woman who spoke to Patton says simply, "It's finished. He paid for what he did. Now we can begin to heal." By this time, Patton is no longer in Germany. He's been reassigned. But when informed of Hoffmann's execution, he simply nods and says, "Good. One down. Too many more to go." The Grafeno massacre becomes one of thousands of Nazi war crimes documented and prosecuted. Hoffmann becomes one of thousands of Nazi war criminals executed for their actions. But the confrontation between Patton and Hoffmann stands out. It represents something important, the moment when evil met accountability face to face. What Patton said to Klaus Hoffmann wasn't just about one Nazi commander and one burned village. It was about establishing a principle that would echo through history: war crimes will be punished. Murderers in uniform are still murderers. Following orders doesn't excuse atrocity. Patton's confrontation with Hoffmann helped establish the precedent that would lead to the Nuremberg trials, the Geneva Convention's expansion, and modern international criminal law. The principle that soldiers have a duty to refuse illegal orders. That, just following orders, is not a defense. That war criminals will face justice. The survivors of Grafenau rebuilt their village. A memorial stands there today, listing the names of the 217 people murdered on April 5, 1945. Hoffmann's name appears nowhere, except in the historical record as a convicted war criminal. Patton himself died in December 1945, just months after the war ended. But his legacy includes this: he didn't just defeat Nazi Germany militarily. He held its war criminals accountable personally. He looked evil in the face and told it exactly what it was. The lesson endures: in war, there are still rules. Breaking them has consequences. And those consequences will be enforced, no matter how much time passes or how many excuses are offered. Justice delayed is justice denied. But justice, when it comes, is absolute. Klaus Hoffmann learned that. So did thousands of other Nazi war criminals. And future generations remember: accountability matters. Always. April 1945. General George S. Patton's Third Army is driving deep into Germany, liberating towns and villages at a breakneck pace. The war is nearly won. Nazi Germany is collapsing. But the horrors are just beginning to be revealed. On April 8, elements of the 4th Armored Division enter a small village in Bavaria called Grafenau. What they find stops them cold. The village center is completely destroyed, not by artillery or bombing, but by deliberate fire. Bodies lie in the streets, in their homes, in the church. Men, women, children. Over 200 civilians. All burned alive. The soldiers are hardened combat veterans who've seen death in every form. But this is different. This wasn't combat. This was murder. An American lieutenant radios back to division headquarters: "We've found something. Send the general. He needs to see this." Within hours, Patton arrives. What he sees will fuel a rage that will become legendary. This is the story of what Patton said when he came face to face with the Nazi commander who ordered this atrocity. It's a story of justice, accountability, and the difference between soldiers and war criminals. Patton's jeep rolls into Grafenau in the late afternoon. He's seen combat destruction before: cities reduced to rubble, battlefields littered with dead. But this is different. The destruction is surgical, deliberate. Only certain buildings burned. The church, the town hall, the school. Residential homes. The smell hits him first. Burned flesh mixed with charred wood. It's unmistakable and unforgettable. Bodies are everywhere. Some died trying to escape, frozen mid-run. Others died huddled together in cellars where they sought shelter. Children clutching parents. Families that died together. Patton walks through the devastation in complete silence. His aides follow at a distance. They've never seen him this quiet, this still. He stops at the church. The doors were barred from outside. The congregation was trapped inside when the building was set ablaze. Over 60 people died there, including the priest. Patton removes his helmet. He stands there for a long moment, looking at the charred remains of the church. Then he turns to his intelligence officer and says quietly, "Find out who did this. I want names. I want the commander. And I want him alive." Within hours, Patton's intelligence officers are interviewing survivors. There are only a handful, people who were away from the village when it happened, or who managed to hide successfully. The story they tell is consistent and horrifying. 3 days ago, April 5, an SS unit passed through the village. The commander demanded food, supplies, and compliance. The village mayor tried to surrender peacefully, offering what little they had. The SS commander refused. He claimed the village had aided American forces, completely false. As punishment, he ordered the village destroyed and its population executed. His men methodically went through every building, forcing families into specific locations. The church. The school. The town hall. Large homes. Then they barred the doors and set fire to everything. Those who tried to escape were shot. The entire operation took less than 2 hours. By the time it was finished, over 200 people were dead. The SS unit then moved on, continuing their retreat east. One survivor, an old woman who hid in a root cellar, provides crucial information: the commander's name. SS Sturmbannführer Klaus Hoffmann. And she overheard where they were heading. Patton doesn't wait for official channels. He immediately orders units of the 4th Armored Division to pursue the SS unit. "I want Hoffmann alive," he emphasizes repeatedly. "Alive. I need him to answer for this." The pursuit begins. Intelligence reports suggest Hoffmann's unit is heading northeast toward the Austrian border, probably hoping to disappear into the mountains. American forces move faster. Within 24 hours, they've caught up. April 9, near the town of Passau, American tanks surround what's left of Hoffmann's SS company. The Germans are outnumbered 10-1. They surrender without a fight, Nazi fanatics when burning villages, cowards when facing armed soldiers. Among the prisoners, SS Sturmbannführer Klaus Hoffmann. Age 34. Career SS officer since 1934. Participated in operations in Poland, Russia, and France. Documented war crimes in all theaters. He's brought to Patton's headquarters under heavy guard. Patton is notified immediately. He tells his staff, "I'll see him tomorrow morning. I want a full night to think about what I'm going to say to this bastard." While Hoffmann sits in a holding cell overnight, Patton's intelligence officers compile his file. It makes for grim reading. Hoffmann is a true believer. Joined the Nazi Party in 1930, the SS in 1934. Rose through ranks not through combat ability but through ideological fanaticism and willingness to commit atrocities. In Poland, 1939, participated in mass executions of civilians. In Russia, 1941-43, commanded security units that burned villages suspected of aiding partisans. Documented deaths, thousands. In France, 1944, involved in reprisal killings after D-Day. Grafeno wasn't an aberration. It was standard procedure for him. Hoffmann's file also reveals something chilling: he kept records. Detailed logs of operations, including civilian casualties. He was proud of his work. He saw himself as defending Germany through terror. The file lands on Patton's desk at midnight. He reads it by lamplight in his office. His aide later reports that Patton didn't sleep that night. He sat at his desk, reading and rereading Hoffmann's crimes, preparing for the morning confrontation. Morning, April 10, 1945. Before Hoffmann is brought in, Patton does something unusual. He meets privately with the survivors of Grafeno who've been brought to headquarters. 5 people. An old woman. A teenage boy. 2 middle-aged men. A young mother who lost her entire family. Patton sits with them in a small room. No aides, no translators except one officer who speaks German. He listens to their stories for over an hour. They tell him about the village before the SS came. A peaceful farming community. Families who'd lived there for generations. They tell him about the mayor who tried to surrender peacefully. About the priest who died trying to protect his congregation. About children who burned alive calling for parents who were already dead. The young mother describes watching from hiding as the SS barred the church doors. She heard the screams. She heard her daughter calling for her. And she couldn't do anything. Patton listens to all of it. His famous explosive temper is completely absent. He's utterly silent, utterly focused. When they finish, he tells them through the translator, "You will have justice. I promise you that. And the man who did this will answer to you." 10 a.m. SS Sturmbannführer Klaus Hoffmann is brought into Patton's office. He's still in his SS uniform, though his insignia and decorations have been removed. 2 American MPs flank him. The Grafenau survivors sit along one wall. Patton's senior staff stands along the other. Hoffmann enters with his head high, almost defiant. He's been trained to show no weakness, no fear. He expects to be treated as a prisoner of war under the Geneva Convention. He expects military courtesy between officers, even enemies. What he gets is something very different. Patton is standing behind his desk. He doesn't gesture for Hoffmann to sit, there's no chair offered. He simply stares at the German officer for a long, uncomfortable moment. The silence in the room is absolute. Hoffmann, trained in SS discipline, tries to maintain eye contact. But something in Patton's expression makes him look away. Finally, Patton speaks. His voice is quiet, controlled, ice-cold. "Your SS Sturmbannführer Klaus Hoffmann. You commanded the unit that burned Grafenau 3 days ago. 217 civilians. Men, women, children. Burned alive on your orders." Hoffmann begins to speak in German. The translator starts to interpret, but Patton holds up a hand. "I don't care what you have to say," Patton says. "I'm not interested in excuses. I'm not interested in explanations. I'm here to tell you what you are, and what's going to happen to you." Hoffmann tries again to speak. Patton's voice rises slightly. "Shut your mouth. You speak when I ask you a question. Until then, you stand there and you listen." The room is utterly silent. No one has ever seen Patton like this, controlled rage, ice-cold contempt. He walks around his desk, stopping a few feet from Hoffmann. "You think you're a soldier. You wear a uniform. You hold rank. You expect to be treated as a prisoner of war under military conventions. But you're not a soldier. Soldiers fight other soldiers. What you did wasn't combat. It was murder. Mass murder. You're not a prisoner of war. You're a war criminal. And there's a difference." Hoffmann's facade starts to crack. This isn't going how he expected. Patton continues, "I've fought German soldiers for 2 years. Some of them were brave. Some of them were skilled. I could respect them as enemies. But you're not a soldier. You're a murderer wearing a uniform." Patton picks up a folder from his desk, Hoffmann's file. "We found your records. You kept detailed logs of your operations. Poland. Russia. France. Thousands of civilians. You documented every atrocity like you were proud of it. Like it was something to be remembered." He opens the folder and reads, "Grafenau Operation, April 5, 1945. Village pacified. 217 enemy sympathizers eliminated. Church, school, and residential structures destroyed to prevent future partisan activity. Operation duration, 1 hour 45 minutes. Patton looks up at Hoffmann. Enemy sympathizers. They were farmers. Families. Children. And you burned them alive because you're a coward who was losing a war and wanted to murder defenseless people before running away." Hoffmann tries to maintain composure, but his hands are shaking now. Patton tosses the folder onto his desk with contempt. "You want to know what makes this worse? Germany is beaten. The war is over. You knew that. Everyone knew that. In a week, maybe 2, Germany would surrender anyway. But you still burned that village. Not for military necessity. Not for strategic value. Just because you could. Because you're a sadistic bastard who enjoyed it.